Undercover boss orders breakfast at coffee shop, shocked how one tip change can transform staff lives a gloomy morning. The yellow light from the bakery counter cast down, highlighting every wrinkle on Michael Foster's face. 50-year-old CEO and founder of the famous cafe chain. He sat quietly in the very breakfast cafe he had poured his heart and soul into, building his hands, clenching a steaming cup of coffee as if to steady his racing breath. A young waitress, Olivia, approached, her hands trembling as she carried a plate of toast still warm with the scent of butter. Her hair was disheveled, dark circles under her eyes revealed the marks of countless sleepless nights. She lowered her head slightly, her voice broke each word, slicing into Michael's heart like a knife. I can only afford one meal a day, boss." Michael froze, his gaze hardened, the veins on his hand tensed as he gripped the steaming coffee cup. A single tear fell from Olivia, landing on the tray of toast, a small tear, yet enough to break his heart. Michael thought to himself, just one meal, and it's become their greatest worry. Michael Foster, 50 years old, his voice deep and warm but heavy with unspoken guilt. "I'm Michael Foster, founder of this cafe chain. I've always believed that a cafe doesn't just serve food, it serves hope, a place where every employee can call their second home." The camera pans slowly across the cafe, yellow light weaving through the air, scented with freshly baked toast, casting shadows on the worn wooden tables. But everything had lost the warmth it once had. The staff's eyes averted, weary, with dark circles clearly showing on their faces, traces of long nights working without enough to eat. Sighs mixed with the dry, lifeless beeps of the POS system echoed across the room. Michael, in a simple shirt with no CEO name tag, walked into the cafe like an ordinary customer. He moved slowly, his gaze sweeping across each corner, each bakery station, where he once stood, once called each employee by name with a warm smile. But now he saw only Olivia, the young waitress, head bowed, cleaning tables. Her voice trembled as customers complained, like a tear that hadn't yet fallen. Michael sat down at a familiar table, his eyes contemplative, deep. His breath caught in his chest. He sighed, "This is why I had to come back." His eyes shone with a flicker of hope, as if reminding himself, can a CEO help them without any additional costs? Michael leaned back on the wooden chair, his hands gently gripping the half-empty coffee cup. The yellow light cast down on the table, highlighting every vein on the back of his hand, the hand that once gave out hope and trust, now trembling like the very breath of this cafe. He watched each step of the employees, his eyes missing no detail. A group of young staff laughed near the bakery counter, their movements relaxed, confident, as if they already knew the reward for each shift. They were assigned to the busiest shifts, easily pocketing the tips that others could only dream of. But then Michael's gaze darkened as it stopped at Olivia, the young woman he once considered the sunrise of every morning shift. She was hunched over, clearing table 6, her hands trembling as she gathered the plate still streaked with leftover butter. A sudden tear fell onto the toast tray, merging with the golden light glinting on her disheveled hair. Her eyes looked lost, as if to ask, "Boss, are you still here?" Michael swallowed hard. Old memories flickered in his mind, the early mornings when he personally divided every tip evenly, the employee's eyes then sparkling with hope. But now that very system, the POS machine he had once put his whole trust in, had turned into a double-edged sword. His eyes darted quickly to the POS counter. A young male employee with slick-back hair, eyes darting nervously, fingers dancing rapidly across the POS screen, as if playing a magic trick. The blue light illuminated his face, cold and indifferent. Michael saw each adjustment clearly, tips being slashed, vanishing, as if they'd never existed. The sweat and effort of people like Olivia were devoured with just one tap. Michael's heart clenched. He heard the POS beep, a sound that had once filled him with pride for its transparency, but now stabbed like a cold blade into his memories. His eyes blazed, the eyes of someone who'd been betrayed and angry at himself for letting it happen. His voice echoed inside his chest like a growl in the middle of a storm. "I let this happen." Michael sat frozen in the old wooden chair, his breath held tight, his eyes scanning the entire cafe, a place that had once been his brainchild, his second home that he had built with every ounce of passion. The soft yellow light from the hanging lamps fell on the polished wooden floor, highlighting every detail, every face, every pair of eyes, all holding stories left untold. Michael felt the heavy air thickening around him, as if something was squeezing the very heart of this place. A group of young employees, their aprons neatly pressed, strolled confidently between the packed tables. Their eyes gleamed with self-assurance, as if every reward had already been decided. One young man with perfectly styled hair, lips curled and a cocky smile, strolled among the tables with his tray of pastries, as if he alone controlled everything that happened here. Michael watched him, then glanced quickly at the shift schedule, a prime-time shift, the busiest of the day where tips were often double the other shifts. Michael's eyes darkened, a strange, sharp pain slicing into the beautiful memories he had once worked so hard to build. Across the room, the golden light shone down on Olivia, the young waitress he had once called the sunshine of the cafe. Now she stood hunched by the toast, tray, her shoulders trembling, her eyes lost as if she'd given up hope long ago. Michael saw clearly the dark circles under her eyes, the marks of countless long nights working for tips that barely covered one meal, and sometimes not even that. A tear fell on the tray, merging with the rich scent of butter that he himself used to wake up at 5 a.m. to prepare. Her eyes met Michael's, a look that seemed to silently scream, choked with emotion. "Do you see me? Do you understand I'm fighting just to survive?" Michael swallowed hard, his throat tightening. In that moment, he vividly remembered the crisp mornings when he himself would carefully divide each dollar of tips for his employees. He remembered the bright eyes filled with hope, the warm smiles as they received each dollar from his hands, small sums but filled with promise. He remembered Olivia back then, her eyes sparkling like stars, her voice chattering excitedly about her dream of opening her own bakery. Now that dream had faded under the weight of tips that were coldly manipulated. Michael turned his head toward the POS counter, where the blue light glowed on the face of a young male employee. His eyes were icy cold, and his fingers moved so fast on the POS screen, it was as if he'd practiced it 100 times. A beep sounded short but sharp, like a whip crack right into Michael's heart. On the POS screen, the tip amount had been tampered with and vanished as if it had never existed. The sweat and effort of the staff were being skimmed away brazenly, violently. Michael felt as if someone was squeezing his heart, each beat heavy, choked with emotion. Nearby, another employee gave a mocking smile, eyes sneering, as he looked at Michael. In that glance, Michael clearly saw the satisfaction of someone who knew they were in the safe zone of management, where as long as you knew how to curry favor, there would always be rewards. Michael felt a bitterness deeper than ever. He had once placed his trust in that POS system, trust in transparency and fairness. Now that very tool had become a double-edged sword, stabbing at the trust of people like Olivia and of himself. Michael's voice caught in his throat. He remembered the mornings he had stood behind the bakery counter, carefully dividing tips, his eyes looking at each person as if they were a part of his family. Now that same gaze reflected on the POS screen showed only betrayal. The air in the cafe was thick with the scent of sweat, of toast, and of tears. Michael could hear his own heartbeat pounding as if it might shatter into pieces. A beep from the POS sounded, a sound that used to mean nothing but today was like a knell of truth. Michael stared straight at the POS screen, his eyes blazing, a fire of pain mixed with fury shining like a torch in the night. His voice rose low but sharp as a church bell. "I let this happen." The yellow light shone down on his face, highlighting the beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. One drop fell, mingling with the saltiness of his lips pressed tight. Michael knew this very moment would decide everything. Behind those soulless beeps were the dreams of those who had once placed their trust in him, and now he had to stand up for them, for himself, and for the flame of justice that had never gone out in his heart. Michael gripped his coffee cup, the warmth searing his palm like a bitter reminder that this cafe had once been his dream, the dream of warm mornings of laughter, and the trust he had worked so hard to build day after day. But now that dream seemed torn apart by manipulated tips, by the coldness in the manager's eyes, and by the soulless beeps of the POS machine. He looked around the cafe, each familiar wooden table still in place, but somehow everything felt unfamiliar. The yellow light shone on every face, highlighting the signs of exhaustion that hadn't yet been hidden beneath the makeup of the waitresses. Michael remembered each name, each laugh, each gaze of the staff who had been with him for so many years. Now those eyes were missing the confidence and pride he had worked so hard to instill. Only doubt and fear crept in. The POS machine beeped again like a blade cutting into his heart. A wave of guilt rose up, choking him, because he, the founder, the father of this second home, had let everything slip out of control. Had he ever asked himself, has the system I created betrayed the very people who needed it most? Michael remembered back then when he had stood behind the bakery counter, sleeves rolled up, smiling as he called each staff member by name. He remembered Olivia's sparkling eyes as she received her first tip, her innocent eyes filled with hope that, if I work hard, I'll be rewarded. But now that dream had been stolen by the lazy ones, those who knew how to curry favor with management with just a single tap on the POS screen. He took a deep breath, tasting the bitterness of tears mingled with the bitterness of coffee. Olivia was still standing there, her hair disheveled, her shoulders trembling. Her eyes, though weak, still shone whenever they met his. They seemed to beg, "Please don't let me keep living in this darkness." Michael clearly saw the helplessness on her face when a customer handed her a tip receipt, and all she could do was lower her head and accept either a pitying look or cold indifference. He turned his head toward the POS counter, where the young employee still stood, eyes cold, hands gliding across the screen. Each tap seemed to steal not only tips but also the hope of those who once believed they were treated fairly. The blue light from the POS screen reflected on his face, revealing a smug smile. The smile of someone who thought he was above the rules, above the people who had worked hard every day. Michael felt a surge of anger burning in his chest. Back then, he had sat down with the managers drawing up fair, tip-sharing rules, golden principles, to ensure every employee was fairly rewarded for their work. But now just one click on the POS, just one cold look from management was enough to crush it all. The POS beeped again, sounding like the death knell for the values he had worked so hard to build. Michael gripped his coffee cup tightly, his eyes swept over every face, every pair of eyes, fear and hope intermingled. He saw clearly in Olivia's eyes the pain mixed with a tiny spark of remaining hope, like a small flame waiting for someone to light it. His heart pounded fast and hard, urging, "Stand up, Michael. If not now, then." When, in the thick air filled with sighs and the fading yellow light, he heard the echoes of his own promises from long ago Sunrise breakfast joint, "Will be a second home where every employee is respected and rewarded fairly." That light now seemed about to die out if he didn't stand up to reignite it. Michael stood up, the wooden chair creaking like an alarm bell ringing through the cafe. Every eye turned toward him, the eyes that once called him Boss Michael, with respect, now filled with hope and fear. He felt his heartbeat synchronize with the quiet breaths of Olivia, of every employee silently waiting for a ray of hope. He turned his head toward the POS machine, the cold blue light from the screen still flickering. Each beep sound rang out like a blade cutting through the past and present. He knew it was time to tear away the fake shell, to restore transparency to the tips, the hard-earned money, sweat, and tears of those who had dedicated their youth to this cafe. Michael looked up, his eyes blazing with determination. Under the yellow light, a bead of sweat rolled down his temple, falling like a vow. No one has the right to take away what they have sweat to earn. A beep sounded from the POS. This time it sounded like the drumbeat of a rebellion. Michael knew he could no longer stay silent. This was the moment he had to stand up for Olivia, for all the staff who were waiting, and for the dream he had once promised to guard with all his heart. Michael stood up, the wooden chair beneath him creaked its sound, echoing like an alarm in the silent cafe. The yellow light from the ceiling shone down on his face, the face that had once bowed to distribute every tip to the staff, the face of a man who once called this place a second home, now tightened with the lines of time and pain. He looked around, his eyes sharp as a blade cutting through the thick tension. Every table, every chair, every eye was on him, the people who had built this brand with him. Michael felt his heart pounding as if it would burst into pieces. His voice rang out firm yet trembling with emotion forged over so many years. "I am Michael Foster, the founder of this cafe chain." A wave of whispers rippled through the cafe. Everyone's eyes lit up like a fire burning in the dark. The manager stood near the POS counter, head lowered, his shoulders trembling like a sheet of paper in the wind. The blue light from the POS screen reflected on his face, revealing sweat trickling down his temple, the sweat of someone whose sins had just been exposed. Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a stack of tattered papers soaked with the sweat and tears of staff who had been exploited by dirty tricks. He raised them high, one by one, his voice dropping low but still as sharp as steel, each word like a hammer blow against the wall of lies. "This is your sweat and tears stolen by the very managers who were supposed to protect you." He raised the stack of papers even higher, the yellow light illuminating the altered tips, amounts, the manipulated shift schedules, the threatening messages to staff, irrefutable evidence. Each piece of paper was like a knife slashing into the hearts of those who had dared to betray his trust and the trust of everyone here. Michael took a deep breath, his eyes red but shining with the light of unwavering faith. The POS machine beeped, the sound was like the scream of a truth finally revealed. He stepped forward, his voice rang out strong and unwavering, each word like a declaration. "From today on, every single tip will be distributed fairly to those who deserve it." All eyes were on him, the eyes of people who had once looked up with pride, then bowed their heads in disappointment, now shining with hope once more. Olivia's eyes sparkled with tears, tears that were no longer from fear, but from belief. Belief that justice had finally called the right name. The manager hung his head, his shoulders trembling with each moment, sweat rolling down like blood from the deceit dripping from his false mask. A young employee nearby, the one who used to smirk while skimming tips, stood frozen eyes wide-mouthed, gaping in speechless shock. Michael looked at Olivia, his eyes softening, like a father looking at his daughter, who had just found her hope again. Under the golden light, she stood motionless, still clutching the tray of bread, but her eyes now shone like stars in the night. He knew this very moment would change everything. Her eyes were. The spark reignited, the flame he had promised never to let die. Michael gripped the stack of papers in his hand, feeling each sheet like a confession from a man who had let his trust be betrayed. The yellow light cast his shadow on the wooden floor, the silhouette of a leader standing at the edge of collapse. But in that moment, his eyes blazed with the fire of determination and justice. His voice caught for a second, then rose ringing like a wake-up call. Sunrise Cafe, the place where every single tip will be returned to its rightful owner. The cafe seemed frozen, only the thumping of hearts echoing in every chest. The eyes of the employees fixed on Michael, as if grasping a lifeline of hope, Olivia's eyes glistening with a rare crystalline light that Michael had not seen for many years. She lifted a hand to wipe her tears, her hand trembling, but her eyes steady like a torch in the dark. Michael turned to the manager, his voice sharp like a blade. You and your accomplices have stolen not just money but the trust of every person standing here. From today onward, every tip, every shift will be monitored and shared fairly. I want to see those smiles return, the smiles that once made this place feel like family. The POS machine beeped once more, this time sounding like a vow etched into the hearts of those listening. Transparency and justice were coming back. Michael stepped forward, drawing a small pen from his coat pocket, the same old pen he had used to sign some of the most important decisions of his life. He placed it on the bakery counter right where Olivia stood, the yellow light shining on her hand. His eyes glistened with unwavering faith. Olivia, from today you will be the shift manager. You will hold this pen to sign, to protect, and to carry the flame of hope for people like you. Olivia choked on a sob, tears streaming down her face, but her hands trembled as she reached for the pen. Her eyes looked up at Michael like a child being handed back the wings that had once been stolen away. Michael gave a slight nod, his lips tight, but his eyes shone with gentleness and trust. In the distance, an elderly customer placed his coffee cup down on the table, his eyes slowly following Michael's every movement. He smiled, his gaze gentle, as if seeing something far greater than just a cafe. In that moment, Michael realized Sunrise Cafe had never been just a place that sold bread and coffee. It was a place where every person could find a part of their heart. Michael turned back, his voice deep but resolute. I don't need pretty numbers on a report to be proud. I need every drop of sweat to be returned to the right person, so that here there will be no more tears from hunger, from injustice, but only sincere smiles and eyes bright with hope. The POS beeped once more like a bell ringing in a new beginning. The yellow light shone down on the pen in Olivia's hand, her eyes lit with a glow that Michael knew meant Sunrise Cafe had found its soul again. In that moment, every other sound seemed to vanish, leaving only the beep this time, not the sound of deceit, but the call of truth, a promise carved deep in the heart. Every drop of sweat, every tear of the people here deserves to be respected and cherished like the very breath of Sunrise Cafe. The early morning's golden light shone down on the bakery counter, reflecting in Olivia's eyes, the eyes of someone who had just been given back trust and opportunity after so many exhausting days. Her smile was radiant like a flower freshly watered after a storm, no longer the dull eyes from meager tips or broken dreams, but instead eyes strong and bright like a flame ignited in the darkness. Michael stood still in the cafe, his heart pounding with a revived faith. He looked at Olivia, who was no longer just a young waitress, but now the shift manager, a symbol of resilience and justice. Her eyes shone with the belief that now every tip she received would be enough to buy food, pay utility bills, and light up hope for tomorrow. Every tip was no longer just money, but a full meal, a light of hope, an affirmation that Sunrise Cafe is where every drop of sweat is valued. Michael knew that this solution didn't require a costly revolution, didn't require endless reports. It only needed something surprisingly simple, making the tip system transparent on the POS, sharing tips fairly by shift, and placing a small sign at the cash register. Your tips are the meals of the servers. He stood in the middle of the cafe, watching Olivia show a new employee how to track transparent tips. Everything now seemed so simple, just a short meeting, a few clicks on the POS, and a tiny sign. But its effect was priceless. It restored hope, returned smiles, and gave back the meals that servers had had to trade tears for. Michael straightened his shoulders, his deep voice echoing through the cafe. Just one click, one small sign, and everything is different. No one has to live on leftovers anymore. No one has to tighten their belt just to survive another day. He stepped toward the POS machine, his fingers trembling slightly but his eyes shining with an unwavering light. A single click, and then the tips were displayed, transparently distributed fairly for every shift. A small sign was posted next to the POS. Every tip you give is a meal for the server. Michael turned to Olivia, his voice breaking with emotion. From today onward, you will no longer have to worry about your meal. Olivia stood still beside him, her eyes radiant like the rising sun. She whispered softly, a single tear changed an entire system. Michael gently squeezed her hand, his eyes scanning the cafe, a place once soaked with tears, sweat, and even drops of hope. He knew Sunrise Cafe didn't just sell coffee and toast, it sold trust. And today he had given that trust back to the people who had always believed in him. Michael stood in the middle of the cafe, his breath steadying as if gathering up all the toil and hope of the past days. The yellow light fell across his face, revealing every wrinkle of time and beads of sweat not yet dry. He looked straight into the camera, his eyes sharp but filled with warmth, his voice resonating deep and firm with determination. If you believe that justice is more than just numbers, if you believe that one full meal can change a life, then please share this video so that together we can bring hope back to the places that once felt like a second home. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the real stories of justice and the stories of those who dared to stand up and reclaim hope for themselves and for everyone. His eyes quietly turned to Olivia, the girl who had now become a symbol of faith, then looked out into the distance where the first rays of sunlight were slowly chasing away the darkness.